Hey, Randy Joe here, and this is 1000 Reviews, a series where I plan on reviewing every single album from the 1000 albums to listen to before you die book. And today we're looking at Dinosaur Jr.'s 1988 album, Bug. Bug was released underneath the SST label, produced by uncredited with art direction from Maura Jasper, nationality USA, and a running time of 35 minutes and 24 seconds. Dinosaur Jr. is a noise rock slash alt rock band stemming from the 1980s that feels as if they never captured the heights of Sonic Youth's popularity, nor do they manage to capture the creative process of Sonic Youth. And on top of that, they also don't feel as if they stand that much on their own in terms of their lasting impact, other than being a clear influence on other artists to come. Which is to say that I don't really enjoy or care for Dinosaur Jr.'s music that much, and this album isn't really much of an exception to the rule, as I find this thing to be kind of bare bones and lackluster. Like with most albums that came out of the 80s, this feels like an album full of ideas that aren't fully fleshed out, but feel like a pretty good birthplace for those ideas, as if they are just stemming out of the 80s, but have not quite flourished to the extent like many albums seem to reach in the 90s. It's pretty clear that Dinosaur Jr. is very much a precursor of what's to come from the 90s, specifically with the alt-rock scene and the grunge scene, as this feels very much like early grunge. Like, I'm talking, this feels like a precursor to much of what Nirvana was doing, but again, not to the same extent. Songs like Let It Ride, for example, feel very Nirvana-esque, especially in the vocal delivery, feeling very similar to that of Kurt Cobain, but again, this being done prior to Nirvana's mainstream success. No Bones as well feels like a Nirvana-esque song, but again, not quite as creatively fleshed out as much of their work, or as honest or sincere as much of their work. Then of course the hit on this album, the biggest song to come out of this thing, is the opener Freak Scene, which feels, again, pretty bland to me. It doesn't feel as if it is that adventurous in its sound, and even though it is considered a noise rock song, does not feel all that noisy either. This thing feels very much to me like some bland, generic alt rock that would come out of the 80s and 90s. Stuff like this feels overall very dated in its sound and tone, and if I were to hear this on the radio, I can quickly recognize the time frame it's from, which isn't necessarily a good thing, as this does feel very much like it only can exist in that time, not feeling all that unique or original to stand the test of times either. But like I mentioned, this is considered a noise rock record, just not one that I think reaches the height of what their contemporaries were doing at the time, especially someone like Sonic Youth, who are bigger than Dinosaur Jr. in just about every way and managed to push the boundaries of noise rock much further into a much more interesting direction than Dinosaur Jr. seems to. Their noisiest song on here is the 9th track, Don't, which is easily my favorite one on here because I think it is pretty noisy, pretty abrasive. The vocals are almost screaming for the most part, and the distorted guitars are louder here than they are on anywhere else in the entire album, and it is super intense and vibrant with its tone, and the production as well manages to match its overall ambitious sort of style. If there was one song that I wish that the entire album was more like, it would be Don't, as its ambitious tone and delivery and overall expansive sound just feels much more vibrant and noisy than anything else on this album. For the most part, a lot of this album to me feels very much accessible, too accessible to the point that it's almost like it was created with radio in mind, whereas Don't feels very much like it is ingrained in the creative process. And really at the end of the day, most of this album just comes down to the fact that I just wish it was a bit more unique and a bit more standing the test of time. This feels very 80s, very unfinished and not at all fleshed out in the way I would like. And overall, I really don't see the importance in Dinosaur Jr. other than being very early influencers on what's to come from the 90s music scene. If you like Nirvana, you might enjoy this, as it does feel, again, sort of like a precursor of what they were doing, but not at all fleshed out in my opinion. Most of this is just pretty bare bones generic noise rock by today's standards and doesn't really manage to reach the heights of someone like Sonic Youth. So overall, I'm giving this album a soft rating of 6.2 and a hard rating of 6. It is above average, but not by much in my opinion. And I would say this is a not essential record too. Unless, of course, you want something that is very much a clear influence on what's to come from the 90s. Maybe you're really into 90s alt rock and you like Nirvana, then yeah, check this out. But other than that, I don't see much of a place in listening to this if you're a music fan, because you can find much better music within this genre from their contemporaries at the time. All right, let's see what the next album we're listening to is in the 1001 albums listened to before you died book. All right, 1001, January 878, which is the album. Board of Canada's 1998 album, Music Has the Right to Children. So give that a listen, and I'll review that in about 1 week from now. And that pretty much does it for this video. If you like this video, please hit like and subscribe if you want to follow along listening to every album from the 1000 albums listened to before you die book. And as always, my name is Randy Joe, and I'm signing off.